the second day of May, in the year 1998, unknown to many who lived in Scotland, there was a grand battle that ravaged a great educational institution. But this establishment did not teach laboratory sciences or language arts. Instead, the students substituted biology for herbology, physical education for Quidditch, for this was a magical school for witches and wizards. But within the walls of Hogwarts on this fateful day, many powerful witches and wizards fought in defense and conquest of the magical world. Arguably, the first official skirmish started between two colleagues of the school.
Hogwarts is threatened! Man the boundaries! Protect us! Do your duty to our school!
One was a witch, the head of Gryffindor House, known throughout the wizarding world as Professor Minerva Mcgonagall. She was a natural prodigy, displaying an ability with magic at a very young age. As an adolescent, she attended Hogwarts, where she excelled under the house she would one day lead. She tested perfect on her owls and her newts, her impressive test scores landing her a job at the Ministry of Magic immediately after her schooling ended, taking a role within magical law enforcement. But the Ministry was not McGonagall's passion. In 2 short years, she returned to Hogwarts, where she discovered that teaching was her true desire, going on to hold her tenure as a Transfiguration professor for several decades. She was invaluable to the Order of the Phoenix, not only as a soldier during the First War, but as a guardian and a caretaker in the Second. Her extensive knowledge of magic, especially that of Transfiguration, extended to her battle prowess as much as it did to her tutelage.
Lily. After all this time. Always.
The second was an elusive wizard, former head of Slytherin House, and at the time, the reigning headmaster of the school, known more commonly as Severus Snape. He was one of the most polarizing wizards of his age, a double agent for both of the greatest wizards of his time, Albus Dumbledore and Lord Voldemort. After his time at Hogwarts, he went on to join the Death Eaters, where he committed vicious acts against Muggles and Muggle-born witches and wizards. Yet he had a change of heart when he realized that the love of his life, a Muggle-born witch named Lily Potter, was being targeted by the Dark Lord. Wanting to stop her murder and that of her son, Harry Potter, Snape went turncoat, working for the Order of the Phoenix as a double agent. But after his failed attempt to save Lily's life, he made it his secret life's mission to protect her only son, a task he upheld until his dying day. Quite the debate has arose on who the true victor of McGonagall's and Snape's contest was. One story has them fighting quite evenly, with Snape making his escape only when McGonagall received assistance from other cohorts. Another suggests Snape retreated outright, but not before taking out 2 of his own before making his escape. In either case, both iterations of their fights leave the final outcome in question. But if these two were to face each other in open combat, no interruptions, no additional assistance or tactical retreats, who will come out on top? For this matchup, I will be observing these characters as they appear in the Harry Potter franchise, using both the novels and movies as reference points. Minerva Mcgonagall was a noted specialist of Transfiguration, though she was accomplished in all forms of magic. Minerva carried a 9.5-inch wand made of firwood, with a core of dragon heartstring. Firwood was considered the survivor's wand, according to Ollivander. It was extremely strong and created powerful magic when coupled with Transfiguration. This power and resiliency holds true to the core of the wand, dragon heartstring, which was noted to hold great power, though it was a tad unreliable. Severus Snape was perhaps just below Voldemort in Dumbledore's level of magical brilliance, certainly as an academic, debatably as a duelist. He was taught by both, and he was a natural prodigy, designing his own spells and potions in youth. Voldemort imparted some of his knowledge to Snape, and Dumbledore consulted him on the dark arts, including his cursed hand. There is no definitive description of Snape's wand, but based on photos and his personality, we can make a fair guess. His wand was probably made of holly, considering its dark color and its attributes of dangerous and spiritual quests. This was likely coupled with unicorn hair, which held the most consistent magic, something that runs in line with Snape's own meticulous consistency. Trained by Albus Dumbledore herself, Minerva Mcgonagall was a great talent with Transfiguration. Next to defense against the dark arts, and perhaps charms, Transfiguration seemed to have the most applications in a wand duel. Dumbledore himself was the previous Transfiguration professor, and he used it to great effect in his fight against Voldemort. Likewise, McGonagall used everything in her environment to her benefit, transfiguring anything that could help her achieve an advantage. Her accomplishments with Transfiguration sort of culminate in her animagus form, able to transform herself into a tabby cat at will, though it's dubious how effective this would be in a wand duel. Minerva was also quite skilled with charms. During her fight with Snape, she turned a simple torch of fire into a lasso of flame, then into a dozen daggers. But something that relates to her great and accomplished talent with magic was her ability to wordlessly conjure 3 Patronus charms. Judging by her use of the Imperius Curse, Minerva was quite familiar with both defense against the dark arts and the dark arts themselves. Even though they were illegal, it would seem that any witch or wizard of noteworthy standing had a grasp on the unforgivable curses. When it came to wand dueling, Minerva was as efficient and creative as she was stern, which allowed her, with the assistance of Kingsley Shacklebolt and Horace Slughorn, to contend with Lord Voldemort without injury. Before Snape even graduated from Hogwarts, he created several original spells, including, but not limited to, Sectra Sempra, Landlock, and Levicorpus, the latter, which was widely used even after his time as a student. He was highly accomplished in the dark arts and defense against the dark arts, often consulted by his colleagues with regards to the subjects. Severus was also efficient with charms and Transfiguration, as well as non-verbal magic. Not to mention, he was also talented with wandless magic, including the ability to fly without a broomstick, an ability taught to him directly from Voldemort. As an aside, specifically to you movie-only fans, this previous accomplishment is a big deal in the novels. Unlike the movies, where every Death Eater can turn into black puffs of gliding smoke, in the book continuity, only 2 individuals were capable of unassisted flight. When it was initially discovered that Voldemort had learned to fly, it was a huge revelation for the Order of the Phoenix, an added showcase of his already extraordinary power. So Snape knowing how to fly is sort of a big deal. But much like the man himself, Snape was a layered individual, not only accomplished in the dark arts, but with charms that were associated with lighter magic, notably his use of Patronus charms, which stem from his love for Lily Potter. And as we know from the Harry Potter franchise, love is one of the most powerful forms of magic. As an active duelist, we have often seen Snape on the defense, but he was extremely capable on offense as well, creating quick counterattacks, which George Weasley can attest to. His greatest concrete feat was against Professor McGonagall. In the books, it was described how his quick counter unbalanced McGonagall, and in the movies, he was able to not only repel, but redirect her curses at the Carls behind him. Yet perhaps his greatest magical achievement was his mastery of occlumency and legitimacy. These abilities allowed him to shield his thoughts, and in the latter, extract thoughts from his opponents. His talent was so potent, he even repelled the Dark Lord for several years. So in terms of pure magical abilities, how do these 2 characters compare? Personally, I favor Severus, as he's a fair bit more accomplished, both as a scholar and as an applied duelist. That's not to say that Minerva was not accomplished, but her achievements don't quite compare to his magical invention and magical brilliance. However, she does compare to Snape's natural power. She too was no more far off from Voldemort and Dumbledore as he was, sitting just under the top tier. Also, I favor McGonagall's abilities with Transfiguration over Snape, a specific talent I feel is extremely important in a wand duel. In their fight, particularly in the novel, it seemed to me she had the upper hand with such things. But there is also the added context that Snape was not giving his all, not wanting to harm McGonagall when she was perfectly willing. This is also showcased briefly in the movie, And in the book, it was not until Professor Flitwick and Sprout arrived that Snape took his leave. Ultimately, I side with Snape. There was a reason Dumbledore and Voldemort deferred to him and his intellect. He had a natural talent, with a plethora of feats with regards to magical lore. It's one thing to study magic like Hermione Granger, but Snape's understanding of it was deeply rooted, an understanding that allowed him to be not only well-versed, but inventive. We need look no further than the Half-Blood Prince textbook, where he constantly improved on the directed steps. It was like the difference between an undergraduate and a graduate student. Snape didn't just write the papers, he created the textbooks, formulated his own theses, and when applying that genius, such as what we've seen in the Battle of Hogwarts and the Battle over London, he was far more than just a fair fighter, utilizing spells and curses others simply aren't aware of. For this, Snape gets the edge for his magical abilities. At the age of 61, McGonagall was well outside her physical prime. Reflex and dexterity were of primary concern to a witch or wizard in the middle of a heated duel. Though Minerva was an elderly woman, she seemed to keep up her combative effectiveness during the Second Wizarding War, contending with the likes of Snape and Voldemort himself. In the 5th novel, she even took on a band of Aurors, who shot her with 4 stunning spells, something that should have killed her. Madame Pomfrey later commented on her miraculous recovery, adding that none of the Aurors could have matched her in a straight-up duel. That all said, while she could be perceived as nothing more than an older woman, she was extremely able-bodied, keeping up with much younger adversaries. At nearly half her age, Severus Snape is described as a somewhat short wizard with pale skin, though he might not have been as energetic as someone like Bellatrix Lestrange, or as ferocious as Fenrir Greyback. He seemed to be somewhat of a minimalist. In the duels we've seen him in throughout the Harry Potter movie series, his wand flourishes are nuanced. They are direct and precise, such as what we've seen from his defensive spell work against Potter and McGonagall. Minerva Mcgonagall was one of the very few Hogwarts students to cause a hat stall. The Sorting Hat took 5.5 minutes, when decisions usually took within seconds, to decide that McGonagall was best suited for Gryffindor instead of Ravenclaw. With this, we can take away that Minerva was not only courageous, which was the chief attribute of the house, but also quick-witted. With regards to a fight, it would mean she has no issue going head in first, but also knows how to best control the engagement. Offensively, she has displayed a quick draw and an inventive mind. Based on her primary focus on Transfiguration, I would expect her tactics to revolve around control through distraction and diversion, keeping her opponent off their toes until she can open up their defenses. She certainly had the diversity of spells to do so, and she was likely second only to Dumbledore with regards to her Transfiguration skills, which, as previously stated, I feel is one of the more useful talents in a wand duel, such as what we've seen from her fight against Snape in the Deathly Hallows novel. Defensively, I think her tactics will be much of the same, transfiguring anything around her to defend against curses she cannot outright stonewall. This would be done in a similar vein as Dumbledore, who used Ministry of Magic statues to defend against Voldemort's killing curses. Severus Snape was a very calm, cynical, and calculating wizard. As a student, he was bullied, especially by James Potter and Sirius Black. He did not have very many social skills and spent most of his time in solitude. However, he was very diligent in his studies and became useful to the Death Eaters because of his analytical mind and magical talents. Severus was also very great at withholding his emotion, keeping his true intentions and desires within himself. This mindset carries over to his dueling prowess, particularly with his defensive measures. Using his mastery of occlumency, he could shield his mind to his opponent. I think this is also true for his general style of wand work, which was economical and succinct, reacting just in time as not to give away his strategies, surgical in short. And from this cold defense, he was able to retaliate in quick succession, using complex curses not known to most witches and wizards, simply because he invented those curses himself. Like a true Slytherin, he was ever a snake, lulling his opponent and then striking. But in terms of tactical abilities with regards to magic, I favor McGonagall's more varied techniques and style. I do appreciate Snape's economical and surgical wand work and his ability to react in a moment's notice, But I feel, as long as McGonagall can keep him boxed in, her use of magic could overwhelm him. Yet one slip-up could unbalance McGonagall, as it did when she initially struck first against Snape. But McGonagall is a bit more proactive, controlling the engagement, while Snape is reactive to what his opponent presents him, defending, and then finding the smallest chinks in their armor. When fighting someone of the same reactive style, this could be beneficial, as he was hard to read. But against someone who manages to fight on her own terms, this might not pan out as well. For this, Minerva Mcgonagall gets the slight edge for her tactical abilities. So the alternate fight between McGonagall and Snape, two highly accomplished wizards in their own right, with different outlooks and styles to magic. But in a scenario where there are no circumstantial proceedings in their fight, who would come out on top? Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place in the open ruins of the Great Hall. The following is a hypothetical explanation of the possible outcomes. With wands at the ready, it would be McGonagall who would strike first. As we've seen, she has no issue taking a Gryffindor-like initiative, but she would not just cast curses and spells with reckless abandon. She would use broken stone and transfigured chair stools into pestering birds, giving Snape no room for counter. Yet the polarizing wizard would be able to throw up an effective defense, using his deaf wand work to cast McGonagall's charms aside. In the early fight, I see McGonagall taking a 2-to-1 advantage. Much of the early engagement would look like their fight in the Deathly Hallows novel, with Snape mustering an effective defense and McGonagall being able to turn his counters aside. Yet there is always the possibility of Snape finding a small hole in McGonagall's more elaborate offensive early on. The fight would continue much the same, but Snape would find more and more ground, able to utilize his more complex and esoteric magic. McGonagall would continue to try to control the engagement through environmental manipulation, boxing Snape in with suits of armor and the like, not giving him free rein. But Snape's more precise style needs only the smallest of inches, with no real need for boisterous wand flourishes to achieve his counterattacks. In the mid-fight, I see the bout taking a 2-to-2 split. With Snape taking more initiative, he would find himself unbalancing McGonagall's assault. McGonagall would still hold true, but she would find it difficult to keep Snape under the command of her spellwork. For McGonagall, the fight will become increasingly difficult. Not able to predict Snape's wand work, not only was he extremely dexterous with the wand, he hardly gave himself or his oncoming spells away. Unlike Voldemort, someone McGonagall has contended with the help of two colleagues, Snape doesn't just spam the killing curse, instead, digging into a defense, then striking with an uncommon, or rather unknown curse. In the late fight, I see Snape taking a 2-to-1 advantage. The longer the duel goes, the more chances Snape has to find the inches he needs, finishing his opponent off with a self-invented spell, not easily or knowingly defended. So that brings our total to a 5-to-5 split, though I do feel a victor would emerge. It's interesting when observing Snape and McGonagall side by side, especially when examining their houses and how they relate to their dueling styles. Though sorted into separate houses, I would argue a Venn diagram scenario where they have overlap in Ravenclaw. While it's true McGonagall took no bullshit and was extremely courageous, she was also quite sharp. And while it's true that Snape was cold and ambitious, he was a borderline genius of magic, a true intellect. With this, we see McGonagall taking an aggressive dueling style, tapered by intelligent control factors, and Snape taking on a subtle dueling style, tapered by intelligent breaching factors. And ultimately, I favor Snape's ability to overcome McGonagall in the late fight. Just like their brief fight in the Harry Potter franchise, he would initially stonewall or turn away his colleagues' spells, but without the circumstance of him holding back or not wanting to do harm to an old friend, he would achieve an effective counter, a continued offensive, through his surgical and complex wand work and magic. And thus, after a long-fought wand duel, literally determined by centimeters, I declare Severus Snape, the Half-Blood Prince, the victor. Of course, this is all my opinion, based on the lore of Harry Potter. Do you agree that Snape is most likely the victor? Or do you believe the Transfiguration Professor would take the majority? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, peace, love, and mischief managed.